The lives of the Earls Beauchamp are intricately bound with the history of Kempley, and William Ligon, the seventh Earl, played a key role in shaping the village we see today. William and his wife and children also provided the inspiration for one of the best-known depictions of an aristocratic family in 20th century literature. Kempley lies 17 miles southwest of Madresfield Court, the Beauchamp's moated ancestral home near Malvern. A very large chunk of the village had been in the family since 1686, when it was settled on Thomas Pinder, who rebuilt the old manor house Kempley Court. The family later changed their name to Ligon, and in the early 19th century secured a large fortune through a lucky inheritance. William Ligon, then MP for Worcestershire, petitioned Parliament and paid a substantial amount of cash to secure an earldom. As Rosalind Lady Morrison, granddaughter of the seventh Earl, once admitted in a talk at the Cheltenham Literature Festival, "I go very quiet when there's talk about cash for honours." The great-grandson who shared his name and was to become the seventh Earl Beauchamp was born on the 7th of February 1872 and took his seat in the House of Lords on the death of his father Frederick when he was just 19. Of all the Ligons, William was to prove the most gifted politician. Educated at Eton and Christ Church, Oxford, where he joined the Christian Social Union and was president of the Oxford Union, his independent thinking and social conscience was a marked contrast to his father. The old Earl was remembered after his death by one fellow peer, Lord Liverpool, as a bigoted and rather bitter high churchman of narrow sympathies and not more than moderate understanding. William was the perfect aristocrat. Tall, handsome, intelligent, cultured, artistic and successful. And in May 1902, at a dinner party in Park Lane, also attended by the young Winston Churchill, Earl Beauchamp, then 30, met Lady Lettice Grosvenor, the 26-year-old sister of the Duke of Westminster, reputed to be the richest man in Europe. They were married before the month was out. The glittering match not only linked the Beauchamps to one of England's most influential families, but to the royal family itself, as the bride's sister Margaret was married to the brother of the future Queen Mary. So far, so true to the traditional heritage of Britain's landowning elite. But William was to be a very different Earl Beauchamp to his ancestors. It started when he turned his back on years of aristocratic Tory family tradition and crossed the House of Lords to join the Liberal Party. Family tragedy also shaped his politics. After his beloved younger brother Eddie was killed in South Africa while serving in the Boer War, the Earl became a committed pacifist, and he later vigorously supported the cause of conscientious objectors who were widely condemned as unpatriotic for refusing to fight in the First World War. After the Liberals came to power in 1906, the Earl's political star rose fast. He shared with the Prime Minister, Lord Asquith, a commitment to social reform, and soon had a seat in Cabinet as presiding officer of the Privy Council. Fittingly, for a man with a passion for art and architecture, he was also put in charge of the Department of State responsible for caring for, curating and commissioning works for government buildings and royal palaces. Even more fittingly, for a man inspired from his youth by medieval ideals of devotion and chivalry, his service was rewarded when King George V made him a Knight of the Garter in June 1914. 2 months later, after much soul-searching and a resignation Prime Minister Asquith persuaded him to withdraw, the pacifist Earl was ironically the only cabinet minister present when the Privy Council sanctioned the official proclamation that Britain was at war. 7 children, 3 sons and 4 daughters, were born to William and Lettice between 1903 and 1916. And over the same period the Earl's actions changed the whole social dynamic of Kempley, where almost the entire village was now owned by the Beauchamp family. The Earl's religious, artistic and pacifist ideals were all incorporated in a project that demonstrated his commitment to influencing village life in Kempley. Drawn as he was to pageantry and ritual, it's no surprise that William was an Anglo-Catholic. He would have been aware of a drift to nonconformism in the village, and it's likely this influenced his decision to pay for the erection of the new church of St Edward the Confessor, which was completed in 1903. William was an enthusiastic supporter of both the social and design principles of William Morris's arts and crafts movement, and the church was built using local craftsmen and materials. It was later described by Beauchamp as a mini-cathedral of the arts and crafts movement. 2 carved reliefs on the outside of the church are testament to the Earl's pacifist ideals. 2 doves of peace feature on a crucifixion scene on the east wall, and the words, "Blessed are the peacemakers," from Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount, adorn an image of Christ over the north entrance. Across the road from St Edward's is the old Chapel of Ease building, given over for community use after the new church was built, and still the village hall today. The Cross Keys Inn once stood a few yards away, but it was bought and closed down by the Earl when the church was being built. He paid £100 to have it repaired and turned into a meeting house for village labourers. Soon after the First World War came a decision by the Earl that completely changed the social and economic map of Kempley. On the 2nd and 3rd of July 1919, all his holdings in the Kempley area, apart from 45 acres of woodland, were auctioned off. Kempley Court Farm, Thomas Pinder's 17th century manor house, was lot number 1. Families who for generations owed their living to the Ligon family were free of rents and obedience to his lordship's stewards. Villagers could buy and sell land, acquire new holdings, and, as some records show, swap their farms with others. Over the 2 days of the auction, centuries of obligation and deference were swept away. Even so, the Beauchamps still reached into the lives of locals in some strange ways. Many of the houses had prohibition against the holding or drinking of alcohol written into their deeds. Others prohibited the keeping of pigs. Nonetheless, the auction marked the end of an era and the beginnings of modern Kempley. So what next for the 7th Earl? As the inhabitants of Kempley grew accustomed to the newfound control of their own destiny, a darker fate was awaiting him. Earl Beauchamp became Liberal Party leader in the House of Lords in 1924, but despite his marriage and devoted fatherhood of 7 children suggesting otherwise, the Earl was homosexual, and such activity was still a serious criminal offence. News of his sexual behaviour reached the ears of the king, thanks to his political enemies, chief among them his brother-in-law, the 2nd Duke of Westminster, and in 1931 William's life at the heart of affairs of state came to an abrupt end. To avoid prosecution and a public scandal, he was forced to leave the country with an undertaking never to return. The Earl died of cancer in New York in 1938, a modern-day Renaissance man, exiled by the establishment simply for being gay before it was socially acceptable. A man of many gifts and ideas ahead of his time, his personal tragedy was perhaps that he was born too soon. 7 years later came the publication of Evelyn Waugh's best-known novel, Brideshead Revisited. The country house of the title closely resembles the Beauchamp ancestral home, and it's widely acknowledged that the book's Lord Marchmain and his family were inspired by Beauchamp and his brood. Jane Mulver's book Madresfield, The Real Brideshead, which documents the house's 1,000-year history, opens with a passage from the novel. Paula Byrne tells us in her book Mad World, Evelyn Waugh and the Secrets of Brideshead that the Tory politician and diarist Sir Henry Chips Channon wrote this while reading an advance copy in April 1945. It's obvious that the mise en scène is Madresfield. In fact, all the Beauchamp family feature in it.